And if you didn't know, her hair is a glory unto her. Greetings, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. And if you're new here, welcome. Today we're doing butterfly braids the easy way. Okay, and I started off by pre-parting and sectioning her hair, starting with the middle part, and then I did a slight diagonal part to separate 4 sections. Okay, then for the hair, we are using the French curl braiding hair by Free Tress, and this hair comes with 3 bundles in it. And you want to make sure that you finger comb or wide tooth comb the hair out before you try to break pieces. Okay, this hair can be a hit or miss, and it is pretty hard or challenging to work with. Okay, all right, because it tangles. So make sure you take the time out to do a little separation of the curls before you actually separate the pieces of the hair. So I'm using my good old handy dandy folding chair. Okay, so use whatever you have that you can separate pieces on. It could be on the table. If you have a clothes rack, you could use that. Whatever you could use to kind of lay different pieces of hair. And because these braids are fairly thick, I'm going to separate medium and large pieces of hair. And as you can see, I'm making sure I finger comb before I separate the pieces. And there's no specific amount or number of pieces I pull apart. I just like to do enough that can pretty much get me through the style or a few braids, and then I will break down more hair. And I'm continuing to finger comb the hair because I'm telling y'all, this hair will get tangled. Okay, don't sleep on it. And I believe it's a piece coming up right here. Yep, you'll see. Now you see that knot? Okay, I have a tangle here. And I feel like some of the bundles were easier to work with than others. So, just really take your time and work out any kinks or knots. Sometimes you might have to use the scissors to kind of cut it out, but just take your time. The curl is beautiful, but it requires some work. So now that I have all those pieces separated, I'm going to go in with my product. I'm using the edge booster on the outside and a little shine jam on the inside. So I'm going to take and open up my section and add shine jam in between, so that I can get a nice smooth section. And once you add the product, you're going to go ahead and take your comb and smooth that section out. You want to take your time. Okay, please, please, please. I can't stress this enough. Take your time when styling hair. And I use a little bit of that jam on the other section just to separate it. And again, I'm taking my time going over the part. Even though it looks straight, I'm just making sure that I get that baby to perfection. So now I've parted off my subsection to start the braid, and these will be stitch braids. So I'm going in and adding a small piece of hair right at the beginning, because you want the braid to start pretty small and gradually get bigger as you go back. So it's a preference thing. If you want to start with a bigger piece of hair, or the client needs more hair for the style, by all means go with the flow. I'm using my pinky finger on the right side to create my stitch, and you'll see on the left side I will be using my pointer finger, and I'm just feeding in the hair. And I'm doing this braid like I would do a normal feed in braid. The only difference is I'm going to try to braid a little bit looser than I would do for a traditional or a regular stitch braid. Okay, so instead of making things super tight, I'm going to keep them fairly loose, and you'll see why in just a few. So every time my hand turns, I'm going to make sure I'm creating a stitch. Okay, like I said, I use my pointer finger on the left to create a stitch, and then on the right I use my pinky. But as you just saw there, I use the comb. So when doing stitch braids, use whatever you feel comfortable with. If you need to use your comb or a little finger tool, whatever you need to use to create that stitch line, go ahead and do so. All right, so this is pretty repetitive. I'm just creating my stitches and I'm feeding in the hair. I do have other videos on my channel on how I do stitch braids and feed in braids. So I do suggest that you go and check those videos out so you can get more detail about how you feed in hair or how you do the stitches. This video is mainly about how to get the butterfly effect. As I get towards the back of the head, I start to add bigger pieces of the braiding hair. So if you remember in the beginning, I added a tiny piece, but as I work my way towards the back, I'm going to add bigger pieces of hair. And there's no set amount of pieces of hair that I add in. I just like to go with the flow of the client. So now getting towards the end of the braid, I do like to use some shining jam just to make sure that the client's hair is blending in with that braiding hair very, very well. And now I'm adding a smaller piece of the braiding hair, and I'm going to leave that piece hanging out just so it can create that boho look. And this is all optional. Leave out as many pieces as you want hanging and throughout the braid, the end of the braid, and during the cornrow part of the braid. So on the next braid, you'll see I will have the pieces hanging out and you'll get a better idea of what I'm talking about. At the end, I secured it with the rubber band, and now I'm going to go in and start doing that butterfly effect. And this is the easy part. You literally just take your fingers and I'm going to scratch out on the sides of the braids. I'm going to show a little bit more in detail how I do this, so don't worry. All right, but I'm taking my fingers and I'm literally scratching out each side of the braid. So I'm going up loop by loop and I'm taking and I'm scratching each side. You see here, I'm grabbing both sides and I scratch. I move on to the next two loops and I grab and I scratch. And I feel it's more convenient to work from the bottom of the braid up versus working from the top of the braid back. If you want to try it either way, go for it. One way might work better for you, but as you can see, I'm just continuing to work my way up to the start of the braid. And now I grab my comb and I'm using my comb to help give me a little bit more tugging force. So if that helps, try that out as well. But the main idea is just to scratch the sides of the braid. Okay, and this is why I said do the braid loose, because if you braid it too tight, it's going to be kind of hard to pull on the sides of the braids. So keep that in mind as you braid. You want to keep a pretty slack hand. This is the only time I think I'm going to tell you to do this, but keep your hand pretty slack, because normally I tell you to keep your fingers close together and make sure you're gripping everything pretty firm. But for this particular braid style, you want to make sure you leave your hands nice and open and don't braid it too tight. So I finished that off with a little holding spray just to lock everything in, and now I'm going in with the next braid. Okay, so freshening up the part. So even though I pre-parted, once I get to my next section, I'm gonna always freshen up the part just to make sure everything is to perfection. And if you see me, I did move around to the front of the head. Always move around your client to make sure that that middle part is even. All right, so I'm doing the same thing that I did for the last braid, which was add that product in between, add the shining jam on the outside, comb up my section so that it's nice and smooth. And when you're smoothing, y'all, you want to make sure that you be pretty aggressive so you can get it sleek. So now you'll see here as I'm braiding, in the front, I'll leave that little piece out, and that's going to be my first little dangling curl or boho look, whichever way you want to call it. And I do this by, just like I feed the hair in, instead of adding that piece in, I just let it continue to hang out. So another way you could do this is to crochet it in. I know some people use a hook to crochet the little pieces in. It's all on preference and what you're more comfortable with, but for me, I just like to leave it hanging out of the braid. And you can see I added another piece right there towards the back. You could add more or less if you want. So now I'm going in with the butterfly effect, and I'm doing the same thing. I'm just pulling on the sides of the braid. Okay, each loop I'm pulling and I'm stretching that out to give it the butterfly look. All right, I got that to what I feel like is perfection. And now I'm moving on to my last braid. Nothing changed about this. I kept the same repetition or the same technique that I did for all the other braids. I'm doing the stitch braid, so I started off with a subsection. I added a smaller piece of hair at the top, and now as I'm moving on, I created my stitch line on my right side with the pinky, and on the left side I'm creating my stitch line with my pointer finger. Okay, you'll see it each time your hand turns. You need to be creating a new stitch line. Okay, so every time you braid on each side, you should be making a stitch line, and you pretty much should be feeding in a piece of hair as well. For me, I found it comfortable to feed the hair in between my pointer and my thumb finger. So you'll see once I turn my hand to the right side, I would say, yep, the right side. I like to open up my point and my thumb finger, and I would add the hair in between there, and I would braid on as normal. Okay. And like I said, I do have more detailed videos on how I do that process. So make sure you go check out the other videos. Because in this one, we were really just focusing on that butterfly effect. You can kind of get an idea of how I had added the hair in. I added in between my pointer and my thumb. And I continue to do that all the way until I get to the end of the braid. And like I said, I did leave out curly pieces towards the end of the braid, and I secured it with a rubber band. So this hair is already pretty curly, so you won't need to do any dipping or curling at the end. It's already done for you, thank God. So I really do like that about this hair. So now I'm going in on my last braid, and I'm just stretching it out so we can get that butterfly look going. Okay, and I believe on this side you can see a little bit more in detail what I'm doing. I'm just taking both hands and I'm stretching the braid out. Okay, starting from the end of the braid all the way up to the top. Just taking and pulling pieces. Use a comb or whatever you feel comfortable with to help you pull the hair out. And remember, don't braid it too tight, okay? You want to keep your hand pretty slack so that when you go back to do this part right here, the braid isn't too tight and you won't have a hard time pulling the sides of the braids. Okay, so if any of you have already tried to do this technique and you struggled, maybe that was why. You could have braided the braid too tight and therefore it made it hard to pull the sides loose. And I'm just going in, putting in the finishing touches, fixing up on the stitches, because as you scratch the hair, it can loosen some of your stitches. So I just use some products and the rat tail under my comb, and I like to kind of sharpen up those stitches just by taking and tucking it into the braid. And I just add some finishing spray to the entire style to set everything, and going in now to fix up her baby hair. I'm trimming some of the curly pieces that were too long. I may have had some knots at the end or so. And now I'm just going in with some mousse to sharpen everything up. This also helps set and seal the style to help your client get more longevity. But look, here are the final results. Another cute style down for the board. Like, I'm really feeling the curls. And this is like low maintenance. You can just wake up, shake it, and go. You don't have to try to do too much. And it's also a cute style that you could dress up or down, y'all. So I hope you all enjoyed this video. I hope you was able to get some type of inspiration or information. Please consider subscribing to the channel so you won't miss the next video. And don't forget to like, comment, and share. All right, we'll see you next time. Bless you for watching.